Good evening. This is Dr. Ken Long from the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and I'm here to make a short presentation about our recent curriculum design effort in improving critical thinking at the Command and General Staff College. The mission of the college's curriculum designers was to update our critical thinking curriculum. We consider it to be central to every other piece of curriculum that we teach at the college in our year-long course, because it affects the quality of our reasoning and judgment in every other course, so it's foundational for us. And there were four main drivers that were signals to us to improve the critical thinking. First, we had received extensive student and faculty feedback that critical thinking was both important, central to their educational needs, and that there was room for improvement. We're also in receipt of top-down directives to expand our critical thinking curriculum from Army headquarters. Department of the Army views critical thinking as an essential element of leadership and cognition for any potential future battlefield. Throughout the college and in professional blogs around the world, we're seeing extensive discussions in the doctrinal discussion forums about the importance of critical thinking and how to do it right. So it is the sense of the profession among the thought leaders that critical thinking is necessary and needed. And finally, the college conducted an appreciative sharing of knowledge among student and faculty in order to find out which of the things that we do on a regular basis are most highly valued by the students. And it turns out that critical thinking was one of the most important positives that we have. So we think that we have a pretty good program, but that there's room for improvement, and it's high payoff for students and faculty, and it's an important value for the organization from the top down and amongst the thought leaders. So that makes updating the critical thinking curriculum a high payoff target. In order to meet some condensed timelines for the start of the next academic year, we conducted a Cycle 1 curriculum design rapidly. It was directed from the top down, and it turned out to be under-resourced both in terms of the time that was available and the composition of the design team. And the pilot program to teach it was also under-resourced. Quite naturally, there were quite a few things that we learned from that. It was not all negative. There were quite a few positives that we learned, and we used that to roll into what we think of as Cycle 2 curriculum design, which was more purposeful, incorporated reflective learning and thinking, and was fully integrated across the college. And that's the story of this short presentation. We conducted an initial assessment of stakeholders, and we discovered that there were a number of formal stakeholders. The college's teaching teams, which consists of 24 teams, each with 64 students, taught by a team of 12 instructors from all 5 of the teaching departments: history, leadership, strategy, tactics, and logistics. Both the teaching teams who are on the action line for teaching and the teaching departments that are responsible for pieces of the curriculum are directly and formally stakeholders in any curriculum design process. The college's senior leadership, responsible for the overall educational mission, is a formal stakeholder. The Curriculum Operations Office, which acts as the day-to-day manager of schedules and priorities, is directly involved in any curriculum design effort. And the Faculty Preparation Office, which is a subordinate office that reports to the Dean of Academics and is responsible for ensuring quality of faculty with basic educational techniques and standardizing our instructional methods consistent with college policy. Faculty Preparation Office was a formal stakeholder. We'll see that the Faculty Preparation Office was actually involved in Cycle 1 of the rapid design, because they had been identified by the college leadership to take the lead on Cycle 1 curriculum design. So those are the formal stakeholders. They're formal because they have direct responsibility for pieces of the curriculum by design. There were also 4 informal groups of stakeholders who were more interested in critical thinking curriculum based on their relationship with the doctrine and the concepts and an academic interest. A group called collectively the Friends of Design, who examined design thinking as opposed to military planning from a theoretical perspective. They're interested in expanding the military's repertoire of cognitive processes to include more out-of-the-box thinking, which we collectively call design thinking. So this self-organized team or interest group was vitally interested in critical thinking because they saw a natural alliance between critical thinking and design thinking. There was a semi-formal critical thinking working group, a set of faculty and curriculum designers who were explicitly interested in the critical thinking curriculum as it currently existed, and included members from a multitude of the teaching departments. A group that I call the status quo practitioners, who were very satisfied with the current array of critical thinking curriculum and who were looking for and advocating for improvements on the margin with the existing product. They wanted to leverage the efficiency of what we already had. And then a final small group called the phenomenologists, who are working to identify and describe military thinking models that incorporate planning, design thinking, creativity, paradigmatic thinking, reactive thinking, under time pressure, under conditions of uncertainty, and who are looking to describe what it is that military officers currently do in order to find a match between the best teaching methods for critical thinking and the way Army officers are naturally thinking in practice. So those 4 groups are interested in critical thinking more on the basis of content. The informal stakeholders are concerned about what should we do with the curriculum, whereas the formal stakeholders tended to focus more on who should do it. No one was very satisfied with Cycle 1 of the design cycle because it was ad hoc, explicitly directed, and was under-resourced. The formal stakeholders then became more interested on who should be on the team and how should they lead it and what was their formal authority and who would get to make final decisions, in other words, the process. Whereas the informal stakeholders tended to be more concerned about the content of lessons, which concepts, which models, how much time, what practical exercises, what kind of assessment instruments could be used to measure the net effect of the new curriculum instruction. If we were to draw an organizational culture or power diagram, we might look at the formal authority of college leadership being distributed through the chief of staff, who would make the final decision on how to organize the college's design efforts, and a faculty preparation office, a curriculum operations office, and then the subordinate 5 teaching teams. These organizations all have formal and explicit power relationships in a hierarchy through the chief of staff up to the college leadership. Now, arrayed outside them in with the dotted lines, I've arrayed the informal stakeholders who are connected by means of informal influence and the power that comes from reputation and articulation and academic efforts. And so they come from various and sundry of these formal organizations, and they're organized in terms of interest clusters as opposed to formal position authority. So as we examine how the critical thinking curriculum developed, what we see is a mixture of both formal and informal, rigid structures with a hierarchy, and then informal, almost cloud-like organizations that are arrayed based on interests along various spectrums. To lay out a particular timeline, what we see is a kind of a typical Gantt chart here, where the initial Cycle 1 curriculum design team received their marching orders from senior leaders, the task to conduct the Cycle 1 was directed to the Faculty Preparation Office, even though that was not their formal job description to do that. They really are about preparing faculty to teach using collaborative and adult learning techniques. The Faculty Prep Office received the mission, and they got that mission because there was so little time, and the thought among the senior leaders was that who better to design new critical thinking lessons than people who are teachers of teachers. And so within 2 weeks of a decision being made, that task had been assigned to the Faculty Preparation Office. They had only 2 weeks to actually conduct the design in a small office without much contact with the teaching departments or the teaching teams who would ultimately deliver those lessons. So after 2 weeks of rapid design, they then had 1 week to brief the teaching departments on the new lesson plans. And then the teaching departments had 2 weeks to conduct their own internal preparations to prepare and then deliver the new lessons. We took 1 week to perform after-action reviews to examine what was taught and the feedback from faculty and students. And then that came into to generate a new cycle, or Cycle 2 of design, because there were so many things that were identified in the after-action review that could have been improved upon. It was decided that we were not satisfied with the lesson plans as they existed, and so the Chief of Staff went through a planning process to develop Cycle 2 to learn from our efforts in Cycle 1. So after the after-action reviews were conducted over the course of a week, the Chief of Staff actually directed an additional Appreciative Sharing of Knowledge project for Round 2, and that took 2 weeks to assemble faculty and staff to go through a structured ASK process to find out which of the things in the existing curriculum and in the Cycle 1 pilot were the most effective. After 2 weeks of study, that team came back, and then the Chief of Staff developed a new plan for Cycle 2 over the course of 1 week that incorporated insights from our typical after-action review and the insights from the Appreciative Sharing of Knowledge. And so what happened then over weeks 10 through 20, over the course of about a 10-week period, Cycle 2 design team put together a new set of lessons in a new course that looked explicitly at the connections between lessons, the overarching concepts. It incorporated curriculum designers and faculty from each of the 5 teaching teams, and each of those representatives were looking for ways to write one lesson in the new critical thinking course and to connect that to their existing lessons that would happen later in the year. So integration inside of the course, between the lessons, and then to the broader curriculum at large was an explicit part of the design challenge. We included both formal and informal stakeholders in the design and construction and rehearsals, and then in the delivery of these lessons. So we had people that were concerned both with the process and the content. The Cycle 2 lesson designs were briefed to the teaching departments over the course of a week. They had 1 additional week to prepare and deliver the new lessons. We went through a 1-week after-action review process, and on the basis of the new and improved lesson plans, the college decided to expand the new critical thinking pilot program lessons to the broader college at large. And so after 2 cycles, we now have new curriculum that will be taught in a 10-hour course to all 1,500 students that attend the Command and General Staff College each year. So what we have is a rich case study in the paper that lays out a lot of different elements of organizational design and development and touches critical thinking, power, culture, hierarchies, persuasion, influence, critical thinking, and educational design for professions and for adults. The important, interesting ideas, I think, that could be emphasized in a management class were that we had a multidisciplinary team was formed for Cycle 2. which included a teaching team leader from the leadership department to take charge of Cycle 2. So we put someone responsible and who had proponency for critical thinking, the leadership department, we put them in charge of the overall project so that they had skin in the game. We then incorporated curriculum designers from each department so that we had buy-in and participation from every element of the college. Members of the Appreciative Sharing of Knowledge team were added to the Cycle 2 design team to make sure that we had the positive momentum of things that were already going well to build upon, that we didn't overlook the quality of what we were already doing. And we invited interested outsiders from other informal stakeholder groups to attend and contribute in order to broaden the approach. And so the end result was that the design and teaching team for the pilot for Cycle 2 was very well integrated with stakeholders and then across the college. The new design incorporated insights from both design cycles and from the Appreciative Sharing of Knowledge project, so that we had the maximum opportunity to take advantage of student and faculty insights. The pilot program in Cycle 2 was designed to be scalable so that if and when we had success with the new delivery, that we could rapidly scale that to the larger college. It was important that we didn't make it so technical and that only a passionate insider could teach the course. So scalability was an important design criteria right from the beginning. And that enabled us actually to go from a small pilot teaching 64 students to distribute this across the college to all 1,500 officers, and then to an additional 7,000 officers who will be taught these modules through distance learning techniques next year. The important points for management and leadership scholars and graduate students would be to examine the key differences in how the two teams were selected and resourced between Cycle 1 and Cycle 2. The paper describes this in a case study method that focuses on the decisions that are available to the Chief of Staff at the start of Cycle 2. And the background material supports rich discussions if the teaching case were to be taught in that matter. The teaching case can support inquiries into critical thinking, design thinking, emotional intelligence, appreciative sharing of knowledge, appreciative intelligence, organizational development, the education of adults, power and influence processes inside strong cultures that are organized by top-down hierarchies, and then what can actually be done with pilot programs to loosen up some of those constraints. So we have a very rich case study that's available for you. As the contributing author, I would be more than happy to work with you on adapting that teaching case for your particular organization, or if you have additional questions that you'd like to follow up on. Thank you so much for your attention, and good day.